What's up, people? Today's question is: what is the best possible production for an album? What sounds like when you have perfection in your hands? What does it mean in the terms of rock music or metal music? How much a given genre defines what's perfect, what is good, what is bad, what is just something totally crappy? Well, as you can already figure out before even watching this, starting to watch this video, you already know, if you're smart enough, experienced enough, that there is no right way, a proper, absolutely correct answer to this question, or these questions altogether. Now, this question came to my mind when it was a kind of a discussion going on underneath some video earlier, and there was some well, kind of a debate, or at least a change of opinions, or exchange, maybe is the right word. Anyhow, there was this kind of a commentary that what is the definition of a good metal sound? And I've been pondering it a little bit lately. Of course, before because I'm gonna do this video, but also because, for example, my own band was recording an album, and there was some disagreements between some people, labels, our own band, and whatnot. That what is exactly a good sound? Now, we could basically put these into more kind of a little boxes. Think like this. Band is usually made of multiple instruments and actually quite few people. Now, all these different people, of course, have their own opinions how any given instrument, is gonna sound like, how they wanna define it, for the album, for live circumstances, or just whatever. Also, there are different instruments. Drums are one thing, bass is another, guitars, etc. Even vocals could be in this kind of a context described as an instrument. Now, even drums, then again, could be divided into multiple instruments on their own. Snare sound, what's it going to be like, bass drum, hi-hat, all the cymbals, and so forth. We could even talk about that when it comes to guitar sound, because obviously you have a clean sound, you have a shredded sound, and so forth. So things are quite complicated. I mean, for example, one could say, and be quite right about it, that Rammstein, for example, has a perfect metal sound in so many ways. It's heavy as hell. It's kind of a high fidelity. It's very accurate with lots of precision. You can hear all the nuances and all that stuff. But then again, would that fit, be right stuff for bands like, say, Darkthrone, Battery, Venom? No doubt wouldn't be. Then again, we could also say that maybe Iliarn has very good sound, but that is for acquired taste only. Very raw, unhoned, unpolished, very feral, unforgiving. I mean, how does that make a perfect sound for certain bands? Would that fit, Manowar, Metallica, Iron Maiden, or that Rammstein? Don't think so. And we could go on with this kind of list. Think of Immortal sound. Is it good when you talk about like the latest album, Northern Chaos Gods, or if you compare it even in the context of Immortal, you compare that to Battles from the North or Pure Holocaust. What is the definition of perfect or even good sound for that matter? Now, like I said, many people have all this figured out. But if it was that simple, really, why in the first place we have albums or even demos with crappy sounds? For example, I have a couple of albums that were on my review list, and they are already being kind of reviewed but not published here on Rauta. And they have this ultra crappy sound. And by ultra crappy sound, I mean like drums that don't exactly sound like drums. They're more like one slapping their own thighs or sofa, couch, whatever, pillows or whatnot. To that point of kind of extremity, I find it hard to understand why would anybody at any given time do that kind of a production and say it's quite okay. And if that's quite okay, not to mention good or perfect, whatever it means, is that why would you settle for that? Why would you settle for a crappy sound? And I can only say this in two ways basically. Either people are dumb as hell, or then they just don't care. And to be honest, I'm not sure, I'm not convinced which one is the worst kind of people, operating in music. Doesn't matter if you're producer, vocalist, the recording guy, or the one who mixes the album, because as long as you get to call the shots and say, oh, I like this snare sound, even if it doesn't sound like snare, like, then you're deciding, you're giving the commands that we want to keep it like that for the album or live situation or whatever. Now, live is a more trickier thing, obviously, because acoustics and the equipment, sound settings and whatnot, they all play a part in creating this live sound. So it's way more trickier. Sometimes bands just have to stick with what they are given to. It's not like you can go to a poor bar or some small club with crappy equipment and just, do the magic with all the settings and equalizers and whatnot and just, oh, it's perfect live sound. Because it's not gonna be like that. Open air festivals are totally different breed. Sometimes what should function well in studio or in a given bar or club or music hall wouldn't actually sound nice when it's taken out in the open air festival situation, and vice versa and all that stuff. And we can pretty much take this into another discussion because it doesn't really matter. Sometimes, even poor sound can be, overcome because the overall feeling is just so goddamn good. And good songs, well, good songs sound good even if it's with crappy sounds, production and whatnot. But it's not like a good production is gonna save if you have crappy songs. But for studio albums, say whenever you have at least a few $100 or euros or whatever currency you're using to create a demo recording or an album or whatever the thing here is, digital release, doesn't really matter, it's just a format. But sometimes it seems like all the members in a band, usually 4 to 5 people, they're all so deaf that none of them has a capability or ability to hear that this sound is crap. Okay, I understand if the equipment in use is such a crappy level, or if the band is actually recording the first demo ever, they are maybe teenagers with 14 or 15 and basically experience next to none when it comes to recording. Pad resolution is about to come, there is nothing you can pretty much do about it, except that you can always compare to other sounds. Let me put it this way. When it was 1997 and my band back then, called Nightside, decided to record a demo in Tika Studios in Kemi, Finland, the very same place which has been home to many Impel Nazarene albums, where, well, most of us, even if none, had no experience on recording something at a rehearsal place or for previous bands. So even though we were kind of newbies, we were not total, unexperienced guys. But we had never been recording a full-length album, for example. So we were quite, fresh in a sense, green, if you will. So we ended up going to a studio which was already a bit famous for terms of metal and all that stuff. But we had no vision how our demo was about to be, how it should sound. So what we had after a few days was nice bill, but beyond that, actually a demo which sounded, great. except that for some parts it didn't. For example, my vocals were quite, well, disappointing at the time, but the actual sound of the demo was quite Imbel Nazarene-ish, which is then again a good thing if you happen to be a band like Imbel Nazarene, or maybe a little more kind of a death metal sounding band. But for our melodic black metal, very 1990s stuff, well, obviously it was late 90s, kind of Nordic style, it wasn't exactly the best possible sound. So, for example, if we had more vision, more experience, more understanding how we would like to be, sounding, the demo would have been better in the terms of production. It's not like the production was bad, it was just the wrong type of good. And here is, everything is kind of like coming back to the point. You can have like perfect heavy metal sound. And for a heavy metal album, for bands like Wasp and Manowar, for example, I'm using these as an example because they actually have really good albums which have kind of like next to perfect production for album. Think of like Wasp's two first albums, early 80s, and already the sound is like, wow. And same can be said about some Manowar albums. Really great production that totally supports the music. But would that, work for Marduk or Dark Funeral, Burzum? No, probably not. And for example, in this case of Nightside, the production was the wrong kind of good. For Imbel Nazarene, thumbs up, it would totally kill it. But for us, it was kind of like a wrong kind of thing. It took quite a bit to actually time to get used to that sound of the demo. Nowadays, of course, already more than 20 years ago since we recorded it, yeah, it's nice. But for example, in my opinion, the actual debut album was way better, even though it wasn't this kind of a hi-fi production, if you will, but more kind of a typical melodic Nordic black metal sound. But it was so much more fitting. Everything from the snare sound to, bass drums, guitars, whatever, better. Definitely a lot better. Now, I could give you more examples of my own personal experience with different bands, but that goes kind of beside the point. What I'm trying to say here is that this is kind of a lifelong debate. What kind of, production is good? Because no two people might, feel the same way about any given album. No matter how good that album might be in terms of music or production or both. But it's like even two black metal heads might not feel the same about certain album. Not to mention different albums, different genres, subgenres if you will, and all that stuff. So it's kind of a mood to even have this kind of conversation, which album has good sound and which doesn't. For example, New Immortal is a way good example to kind of sum it up, the whole thing here. Because, for example, it's kind of a good production, and at the same time, it really isn't. It's kind of almost plastic because it's so sterile. It's so, I don't know, so produced. For example, some labels might just deem that this kind of album should have more roughness, more dirt, more raw power. I don't know. And same could be said about like Dimmu Borgir and whatnot. Of course, when you have orchestral things, you just have to do things quite different versus, say, Burzum or Dark Throne or like bands like Ilion, which are really simple, really minimalistic riffs and all that stuff. But overall, a definition of good production, good guitar sound, I mean, it's very personal. And even though as many times I have, read these kind of like, this just boss metal sound for a perfect death metal album or whatever, yeah, surely it's the base level of the sound. But when you take amplifiers, all the different effects, post-production or whatever, mixing and blah, 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 everything changes. You can just ruin even a good start sound because you just kind of screw it up. And vice versa also. You can have quite poor starting point, but you can quite a bit fix it. But then again, it might go totally wrong direction. The guy doing the guitars might feel like, oh, it's way better but then the drummer guy or the label guy or the biggest fan of the band might be just disappointed because it went for the wrong direction. So, like I said, to sum it up, there is no perfect sound. It's like chasing the dragon. It's always that magic that might be just like one step ahead of you, but you will never get that. And for example, in the case of Marduk's latest album, Victoria, some people were very disappointed because it was kind of a back to the 90s vibe. While some people, like me in a way, also quite happy about it because it sounded fresh, just because it was kind of a doing retro thing. So whatever you do, be aware that somebody might just hate your guts because you are doing the wrong moves, even though you think you have the perfect guitar sound, perfect drum sound, perfect vocals, whatever. Just be prepared to get disappointed. That's the kind of only way to handle this. And kill your darlings. No way you can win everybody's sweet emotions, feelings, words, whatnot. Anyhow, this is my take on what is a good sound for a metal album. Shoot me if you need to, but maybe more likely, give me a comment on the box below and tell me what is a good sound, like an example of album, and what is the bad sound, maybe followed by another example. I'm more than happy to hear from you guys and girls and whatnot how it's gonna be, good versus bad and all that. Good night and see you soon with more Rauta stuff your way. Bye bye.